I never thought I'd see the day where the person I trusted most could make me feel invisible in my own marriage. My name is Sophia, and my husband, Mark, used to be everything I ever wanted. Charming, attentive, loving. But over the last year, something had changed. The late-night messages he claimed were work, the sudden obsession with his phone, the way he barely glanced at me during dinner. I told myself I was imagining things. Then came the night that changed. Everything we had just finished, arguing over something trivial. I honestly don't even remember what. But the tension had been building for weeks. I walked into our bedroom, hoping for some sign that he still cared, and what I got instead was a punch straight to the gut. "Why can't you be more like my ex?" He spat, not even trying to soften the words. He never complained, never said no, you just nag. It felt like he had ripped me in half. Not physically, but emotionally. All the years of love, all the sacrifices, all the quiet compromises seemed to vanish in a single sentence. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind screaming, did he really just say that? Mark didn't even look at me. He sank into the bed like nothing had happened, scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but instead, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't the first time he had tried to make me feel small, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't going to take it anymore. That night, I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't even cry. I started planning, slowly, carefully, and in my mind, I built the perfect revenge, something he would never see coming, something that would make him realize exactly what it meant to cross me. Little did he know. He had just handed me the blueprint to end this marriage on my terms. The next morning, Mark acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed me on the cheek, muttered a good morning, and disappeared into his day. But I couldn't shake the echo of his words. "Why can't you be more like my ex?" I spent the day going through our home, observing him like a stranger. I noticed the little things I had ignored for months. The way he left dishes in the sink without washing. The way he scoffed at my suggestions for our weekend plans. The way he barely remembered my mother's birthday last week. These weren't just habits. They were signs, clues that the man I married had changed, or maybe he had always been this way, and I just refused to see it. By evening, I found myself in the bedroom, notebook in hand. I started writing everything down, every slight, every careless comment, every memory of how he made me feel small. It felt almost cathartic, turning the pain into something tangible. And then it hit me. The more I wrote, the more I realized that I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to beg. I didn't even need to confront him directly. I needed leverage. I began carefully documenting our shared finances, his patterns, his lies. I revisited our texts and emails, piecing together every moment that could prove his negligence, his lack of respect, and yes, his betrayal. It was meticulous work. Days turned into weeks. Every time he insulted me, I smiled politely, noting it in my little ledger of proof. Every time he boasted about how perfect his ex had been, I stored it mentally, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I won't lie. Sometimes I felt guilty. But then I remembered his words, the casual cruelty in his voice, the way he made me doubt my worth. That guilt faded quickly. What I felt instead was clarity, focus, determination. I started dropping subtle hints in conversations with friends, colleagues, even his closest confidants. I planted seeds. Not lies, just truths he couldn't escape. Every casual remark, every innocent question from me became a tool. By the time he realized it, the plan would be unstoppable. And the best part? He didn't suspect a thing. He thought I was broken, fragile, crushed by his comparisons. But the truth was, I was ready to make him understand exactly what it meant to cross me. It started small, almost invisible, like a shadow slipping through the cracks. I didn't storm into Mark's office yelling accusations, and I didn't leave snide notes around the house. No, this was far more satisfying. I worked quietly, deliberately, like a chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. I began by subtly undermining his ego in ways he couldn't trace. The friends he bragged to? I gently corrected them when he exaggerated his achievements, planting doubt without ever seeming vindictive. The co-workers he sought praise from? I offered alternate perspectives that made him look slightly careless. It wasn't malicious. It was precise, surgical. Then came the personal touches. I started controlling the little things he took for granted. His laundry, his favorite snacks, even the way his shirts were folded. Everything just shifted. Not drastically, but enough to make him feel subtly off balance. Mark, who once thrived on the illusion of control, started showing signs of irritation. A snapped comment here, a frustrated sigh there. and each one felt like a tiny victory. The most satisfying part? He still believed he was winning, still thought he was untouchable. And that arrogance? Oh, it made the reveal even sweeter. I also began documenting everything. Every careless word, every slight, every inconsiderate action. Emails, texts, receipts, even photographs when needed. My ledger of proof was growing, and with it, my confidence. This wasn't just revenge. This was liberation. And then there was the social aspect. I knew he valued his image, his pride, his reputation, his perfect husband facade. I started seeding stories with mutual friends and acquaintances. Subtle truths framed as casual observations. A comment here about his dismissiveness. A casual mention of how little he paid attention to my achievements. Nothing that screamed revenge, but everything that chipped away at his constructed reality. One evening, Mark leaned back in the couch, scrolling through his phone with that smug grin he wore when he thought he was untouchable. I looked at him quietly from across the room, my coffee cup warm in my hand, and I let a small, knowing smile play across my lips. He didn't know it yet, but his world was slowly unraveling. And by the time he realized it, I would be standing tall, untouchable, and victorious. Because here's the thing. Revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming yourself. And I was just getting started. The day finally came when Mark began to realize that something was off. Not the tiny irritations I'd orchestrated, not the subtle undermining. No, this was bigger. He felt it in the air, a sense that the world he had controlled with arrogance and entitlement was shifting beneath his feet. And I was the one holding the lever. It started with his friends. Casual comments I'd planted months ago now bubbled to the surface. Questions, doubts, whispers, things he couldn't trace back to me. I watched him squirm politely, trying to laugh them off, but I could see the tension building behind his eyes. The perfect husband mask was cracking. Next came the evidence I had meticulously gathered. The texts, the emails, the receipts of lies he'd tried to hide, even small betrayals I had quietly documented over the past months. I didn't throw it all at him at once. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, I revealed it strategically, piece by piece. Each revelation was like a scalpel cutting through his carefully constructed world. The most delicious moment came during a casual dinner with his closest friends, my so-called innocent gathering. Mark was telling a story, embellishing his triumphs, his charm, his so-called perfection. I sipped my wine, smiling politely, then leaned forward and asked a simple question. Mark, remember when you said you'd finished the report for the office last week? I noticed some emails suggesting otherwise. Did you forget to send them? The silence was instantaneous. His friends glanced between us, confusion rippling through the table. Mark's face went pale. He stammered, tried to explain, but the evidence was right there. Text timestamps, screenshots, and subtle inconsistencies he couldn't deny. It didn't stop there. Over the next few hours, I revealed more. Small things at first. Personal betrayals, careless insults, times he compared me to his ex, all carefully documented. Each revelation sank into him, and with every word I spoke, I could feel the balance of power shifting. By the end of the evening, Mark was pale, silent, and humiliated. Not in a cruel public way, but in the exact way that made him feel the weight of his actions. He had underestimated me, dismissed me, and thought he could control the narrative. But I had spent months crafting my response. My revenge wasn't a momentary explosion. It was an unstoppable storm. And as I watched him finally grasp the reality of the situation, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pure, unshakable satisfaction. Not hatred, not anger, satisfaction. Because this wasn't about breaking him. It was about reclaiming myself. My dignity, my power. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg. I simply handed him the final piece of the puzzle, a neatly packed suitcase, my calm voice slicing through the tension. Mark, I think it's time for you to leave. I hope you finally understand what it means to treat someone with respect. He stared at me, shocked, speechless. No threats, no excuses, no blaming. It was over. My revenge was complete. And in that moment, I knew I had won, not by hurting him, but by proving that I would never be invisible again. I placed the last document on top of his neatly folded shirts, a copy of the divorce petition, my name in bold, steady letters. The suitcase looked almost innocent, like it belonged to any other husband heading off for a trip. But inside, it carried his entire double life, stripped bare. When Daniel walked into the room, he froze. His eyes darted from the suitcase to me, sitting calmly on the bed with my legs crossed and hands folded in my lap. "What's this?" he asked, his voice uneven. Packing, I replied. My tone was steady, but inside adrenaline surged through my veins. For what? His voice cracked slightly. For you. He pulled the suitcase closer, unzipped it, and the moment his eyes landed on the papers, his face drained of color. He stumbled through the pages, screenshots of messages, bank statements, the smiling photos of him with women who weren't me. His breath came in short, panicked bursts. Sophia, I can explain. No. I cut in, my voice sharp, final. You don't explain. You don't justify. Not anymore. His eyes lifted, searching my face, desperate for a sign of weakness. You can't just do this. I love you. You don't understand. I stood, heels clicking against the hardwood floor, and walked past him. At the door, I paused. If you loved me, Daniel, you wouldn't have compared me to someone else. You wouldn't have made me invisible in my own marriage. I left the suitcase on the bed and stepped out, my chest heaving, my hands trembling, even though I didn't let him see it. Behind me, silence thick in the air. Then a thud echoed, the sound of Daniel collapsing onto the bed, his breath ragged. I didn't turn back, but I knew this was only the beginning. When I left Daniel with his suitcase, I thought maybe he'd scream, or chase after me, or break something. That's who he had always been. Loud, defensive, quick to anger. But that night, there was only silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you wonder if the storm is gathering in secret. I slept in the guest room. I locked the door, slid the chain into place, and let exhaustion carry me away. The next morning, the storm arrived. I woke to pounding on the door. Daniel's voice cracked through the wood, desperate and raw. Sophia, open the door. Please, just talk to me. I stayed silent. I wanted him to feel what silence was like. For hours, he alternated between begging and raging. First, his voice softened, almost childlike. We can fix this. I'll change, I promise. Don't throw us away. Then it hardened into something venomous. You think you're better than me? You'll regret this. No one else will ever put up with you. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, listening to every word. Not because I cared, but because I wanted to memorize it. Every plea, every threat. Proof of who he truly was when his mask slipped. By afternoon, the knocking stopped. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. But his suitcase was gone. And with it, so was he. For the first time in years, our home was silent. No dirty socks on the floor. No blaring sports highlights in the living room. No glow of his phone lighting up the bedroom at midnight. Just me. Just peace, but the world outside wasn't so peaceful. By the end of the week, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Mutual friends, his family, even my co-workers, all of them had suddenly turned into messengers. Daniel's saying you overreacted. He told us you kicked him out for no reason. Come on, Sophia. Marriage is hard. Maybe you should just forgive him. The audacity almost made me laugh. Forgive him? For comparing me to his ex? For betraying me behind closed doors? For making me question my worth every single day? I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Instead, I let Daniel talk. The more he spoke, the more rope he gave himself. Because the truth has a funny way of surfacing, and I had more than enough evidence tucked safely in my lawyer's hands. Still, part of me wanted to see his mask fall in public. I wanted everyone else to see the man I'd seen for months. And soon, I would get exactly that. Because Daniel wasn't done fighting. And neither was I. By the time the court date arrived, Daniel had reinvented himself as the tragic, abandoned husband. To his friends, he was the poor man blindsided by a cruel wife. To his family, he was the victim of my irrational jealousy. And to himself, he was still the hero of the story, the one who deserved sympathy, loyalty, and somehow, me. I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer at my side, heels clicking like drumbeats of war. I wasn't wearing black or gray or the muted tones Daniel once insisted looked appropriate for me. No, I wore deep red. A color that said, I am not invisible anymore. Daniel looked up when I entered, and for the briefest second, his mask slipped. His lips parted. His eyes widened. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as the wife he'd controlled, but as the woman who had slipped from his grip. The judge called the session to order, and it began. Daniel's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, paranoid, even vindictive. He leaned heavily on Daniel's version of events, that I'd thrown him out without cause, that I'd fabricated his affairs, that I was trying to ruin him out of spite. But then, my lawyer stood, calm, precise, surgical. Your Honor, she began, sliding a thick binder onto the table. My client isn't here to spin stories. She's here with facts. And one by one, the facts unfolded. Screenshots projected onto a screen. Bank records laid out in tidy rows. Photos of Daniel smiling with women he had sworn were just colleagues. Text messages where he compared me, by name, to his ex. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint scratching of pens from the journalists, who had decided to cover the case after hearing whispers of a corporate executive with a messy double. Daniel's face drained with every piece of evidence. His lawyer tried to object, but each objection was swatted down by the judge, who grew visibly more irritated with every new lie Daniel was caught in. And then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. From the back of the courtroom, a figure stood up. Tall, poised, familiar. Anna, the ex. She wasn't the woman I had imagined. No sparkling temptress, no goddess hovering over my marriage. She looked tired, wary, like someone who had carried Daniel's poison before and barely survived it. The judge permitted her to speak, and when she took the stand, her voice was steady but laced with years of unhealed wounds. "Daniel did the same thing to me," she said. "The lies, the comparisons, the affairs, the manipulation. I left because I thought he would change with someone else. But looking at this," her eyes flicked toward me, "I realize he never changed. He just found another woman to break." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Even the judge's expression shifted from irritation to disdain. Daniel sputtered, face red, hands clenched on the table. "She's lying! They're both lying!" But it was too late. His credibility had shattered. By the end of the hearing, the judge granted me full financial security, protection over my accounts, and expedited divorce proceedings. Daniel's reputation, once polished and enviable, was now stained with public disgrace. As I walked out of the courtroom, Anna caught my eye. For a moment, we stood across from each other, two women who had loved the same man. Two women who had been compared and discarded. Two women who had finally seen through the illusion. She gave me the smallest nod, an acknowledgement, a silent sisterhood. And I returned it. Daniel, meanwhile, was left behind. A man stripped of his masks, his charm, his power. But I wasn't finished yet, because destroying his lies in court was only the beginning. People assume revenge ends in the courtroom, when the judge's gavel comes down and the paperwork is signed. But the truth? Revenge isn't a single moment. It's a series of small, calculated victories that build into something unstoppable. And Daniel was about to learn that. After the hearing, Daniel's world began to unravel faster than I could have planned. Word of the case spread through his company. The whispers of infidelity, the screenshots, the financial inconsistencies, all of it made its way into the hands of the people he worked with. By the next quarter, he was quietly let go. No severance. No glowing recommendation. Just a man escorted out of the building he once bragged about running. His friends, the ones who had parroted his lies about me, suddenly vanished. Nobody wanted to be associated with scandal. His family, who had begged me to be patient with him, stopped calling when the truth of his affairs came out in court records. Daniel was left with nothing but his own reflection. And from what I heard, even he couldn't stand that. For me, life didn't just go on. It transformed. I threw myself into work, not as an escape, but as a reclamation. The energy I had once wasted on keeping Daniel happy, I redirected into myself. My projects thrived. Promotions came quickly. Colleagues began to see me not as Daniel's wife, but as Sophia. Sharp, capable, unstoppable. I moved into a new apartment overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, fresh paint. No ghosts lurking in the corners. For the first time in years, when I looked around, everything in the room was mine. My choices, my peace. We had met through mutual friends months earlier, but I hadn't allowed myself to see her fully until now. She was warm where Daniel had been cold, steady where he had been volatile. She didn't ask me to be more like anyone else. She looked at me like I was enough, exactly as I was. The first time she held my hand in public, I almost cried. Because it felt natural, simple, no comparisons, no conditions, just love. But revenge. Oh, revenge still had one last card to play. One evening, I received an invitation in the mail. It was for Daniel's networking event, some desperate attempt to rebuild his reputation with the few business contacts he had left. At first, I considered tossing it in the trash. Why bother? He was already ruined. But then I remembered the nights I had sat alone while he smiled at his phone. The times he had left me feeling like a shadow in my own marriage. The cruel words, "Why can't you be more like my ex?" No, he needed to see me. One last time. Not broken, not silent, but victorious, so I went. When I walked in, heads turned. My red dress shimmered under the lights, my hair pinned back with effortless confidence. And on my arm, Olivia, Daniel's eyes widened the second he saw us. His smile faltered. His carefully crafted image cracked. I didn't have to say a word. My presence alone was enough. Proof that I had not only survived him, but thrived beyond him. Olivia leaned toward me, whispering softly, "He looks like he's seen a ghost." I smiled. "No, he's just seen the woman he thought he destroyed." We didn't stay long. Just long enough for him to choke on the sight of me, happy, radiant, loved. Just long enough for every whisper in the room to shift from sympathy for him to admiration for me. As we left, I glanced back once. Daniel stood alone, clutching a glass of whiskey like it was a lifeline. His shoulders slumped, his reflection warped in the window beside him. And I realized this was the revenge. Not the evidence, not the courtroom, not even the financial ruin. The revenge was me.